It started with a call from my aunt that felt more like a soft tug on the past than an actual invitation. "Your cousin's helping fix the old cabin this week," she'd said. "You could use the break. Come stay." I said yes, before thinking it through. Maybe I missed the mountains more than I realized. Or maybe I missed him. The drive up was quiet, save for the occasional buzz of my phone and the low hum of the highway. The cabin stood the same way it always had, half forgotten in the pines, smelling of cedar, sap, and memory. The last time I was there, I was still figuring out who I was, hiding pieces of myself in unfinished sentences and nervous glances. He had been part of those summers too, my cousin, a year older, louder, confident in a way I envied and resented. Now, as I stepped out of the car, the air felt thinner, colder, maybe, or just heavier with everything unsaid. He was already on the porch, shirt half clinging from sweat, hammer swinging loosely from his hand. He looked older, scruffier, taller maybe, but still with that crooked half-smile like. He was always mid-laugh or mid-secret. "Well, look who made it," he called. "Thought you'd bail. Thought you'd forget to tell your mom you were inviting me." He laughed, and something about the sound slid under my skin like a splinter. Not sharp, just something I couldn't ignore. We hadn't been close. In years, not really. Life had a way of stretching the silence between people until it felt natural. But now we were here, two grown men, sharing the same cabin, same air, same history. I wasn't sure what that would stir up. Inside, not much had changed. The same faded couch we once fought over for space, the same dusty windows filtering, golden light like a movie scene stuck on pause. He tossed me a rolled-up blanket. "Still hate the top bunk?" I shrugged. "Still afraid you'll talk in your sleep." He smirked, eyes flicking to me, then away.
Act.
"Not talking you should worry about." That line landed somewhere between a joke and something else, something that prickled the back of my neck. We fell into a rhythm that first day, fixing floorboards, stacking firewood, arguing about what music to play. And beneath all of it, small things kept catching my breath: the way his shirt rode up when he reached for the roof beam, the way he whistled absently when he worked, the way he'd glance at me sometimes, like he'd started a thought but hadn't finished it. There was something in those silences between us, years of things neither of us said. That night, on the bottom bunk, watching the flicker of firelight dance across the wooden ceiling, he was above me, one leg hanging over the edge, softly bouncing. I could hear him shifting, adjusting, then still. Then came his voice, quiet, almost thoughtful. "You ever think about how different we turned out?" I didn't answer right away. "Yeah." Sometimes. He let the silence sit for a while. Then, "You ever think about who you'd be if you didn't hold so much back?" I turned onto my side, facing the wall, breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat. He wasn't asking what it sounded like. Or maybe he was. Either way, I didn't reply. I just lay there quiet still, pretending I was already asleep, but I wasn't, and I would feel everything that happened behind me. Every breath, every shift of the mattress, every hesitation, something was coming. I didn't know what yet. I felt it curling around the edges of that silence, like a storm that wasn't weather, and I knew this trip would change us. Maybe not in the way I'd feared, but in the way I'd hoped without daring to admit it. Asterisk, asterisk, growing up. We weren't just cousins, we were shadows of each other. Summers at the cabin blurred into a string of muddy hikes, bad jokes, and late night dares. He was always louder, braver, the one who threw rocks at hornet nests just to see what would happen. I was quieter, watching from the porch, heart in my throat, but never saying no when he called out, "Simon, you scared?" Maybe that's what bound us, the way he pulled me forward when I would have held back. Even then, I felt something I didn't know how to name. Something that burned in the pit of my stomach when he tossed his arm around my shoulder, sweaty and laughing. Something that stuck with me long after the summer ended. We drifted as teenagers. Different schools, different states. And once I started realizing the kind of feelings I had, I stopped calling. He never asked why, neither did I. But now, back At the cabin, it felt like no time had passed. The ease came back like muscle memory. On the second day, we spent hours clearing out the shed. Dust flew like pollen in the air. He sneezed dramatically, tossing an old fishing net at me. "Still allergic to effort?" he joked. "Still allergic to you?" I shot back. He laughed, deep and unguarded. I smiled too long after the moment had passed. Later, while we sat on the porch drinking watered-down lemonade from chipped mugs, he nudged my shoulder with his. "You were always the smart one," he said, squinting into the sun. "Remember when I tried to patch the canoe with duct tape, and you said it was a physics disaster waiting to happen? Yeah, you almost drowned. You didn't even jump in to save me. I figured your ego would float." He threw his head back, laughing. That sound, it wasn't just nostalgic. It did something to me that night. As we laid out our bedding, him taking the top bunk again, he frowned, holding up the old sleeping bag he'd brought. "Zipper's busted," he said, tugging at it. "Figures you want mine?" I offered. Maybe too quickly. He tilted his head. We'll figure it out. You still sleep like a corpse, right? Peacefully and beautifully. Thank you." He smirked. "I might just sneak in beside you if it gets cold." He was joking. I knew he was joking. But the image planted itself in my mind like a flickering match. "Yeah," I said, voice catching. "Sure." The third day brought a hiking trip up the ridge. It wasn't steep, but it was rocky, and about halfway up, I twisted my ankle on a loose stone. Nothing serious, just enough to curse under my breath. He turned fast. "You okay?" "Yeah, just rolled it. I can walk." "You're limping like a 90-year-old librarian." I tried to wave him off, but he came up beside me anyway, slinging an arm over my shoulder, pulling me close. "Here," he said. "Use me." My brain went quiet. He was warm, solid, and annoyingly close. His shirt smelled faintly of cedar and sweat. My arm rested against the small of his back, and I could feel the rise and fall of his breath. We walked like that for a while. I couldn't tell if he noticed how tense I was, or if he did and just didn't say anything. Back at the cabin, he disappeared into the kitchen and re-emerged with a bag of frozen peas wrapped in a towel. "For your dramatic injury," he said, kneeling in front of me. I sat down, and he gently placed the makeshift ice pack on my ankle, his fingers grazing my skin. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," he said, looking up. And just for a second, his eyes stayed on mine a little too long. There was a quiet in the room, then one that wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy with something unspoken. He looked away first, standing up quickly. "I'll start the fire. Getting chilly." As the flames licked the inside of the old hearth, we sat across from each other, the shadows playing over our faces. He tossed. "Me a marshmallow bag? Still toast yours until it catches fire? Still prefer yours burnt so I can steal the good ones?" He grinned. "Some things don't change." I watched him in the firelight, his face softer than I remembered, his jaw a little more defined, his eyes thoughtful. That night, after he climbed to the top bunk, we didn't talk much. Just the sound of frogs outside, the occasional creak of the wood settling. But at some point, he asked, "Why'd we stop hanging out?" The question hit me sideways. I hesitated. Life, distance, timing. He shifted above me. "You ever think about how different it'd be if we hadn't?" I did, all the time. But I didn't say that. Instead, I just said, "Maybe it's not too late." He didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Yeah, maybe." His foot dangled over the side again. He nudged my blanket lightly with his toe. It was barely a touch, but it felt electric. And when I turned onto my side, facing away again, I wondered if he was watching me. I didn't sleep right away. I lay there, heart too loud, breath shallow, remembering his voice, his laugh, the way his hand felt brushing against mine, and I knew something had shifted. Not all the way, but enough. Enough to make me wish morning would come slower, just so I could hold on to this version of us a little longer. The storm didn't come, but the road did collapse. A rock slide somewhere up near the main trail had taken out the only passable road in or out of the ridge. No one was hurt, but the ranger station had posted a warning: "Stay put until cleanup." Could take a couple of days. He read it aloud from his phone, then looked at me across the porch. Well, guess it's just you and me. My mouth went dry. Yeah, just us. There was a silence between us that didn't feel like boredom or frustration. It felt dense, like something suspended in the air, too fragile to name but too real to ignore. We spent the morning chopping firewood. Or rather, he chopped, and I sat with a wrapped ankle, pretending to help by stacking unevenly. He didn't complain. Just smirked now and then, shirt hanging open, sweat glistening on his collarbone. Not the worst company to be stranded with, said, tossing another log. Flatter me again and I might limp just for sympathy. Laughed, wiping his brow with the back of his arm. He always did like being taken care of. That line landed harder than he realized, or maybe he did realize. I couldn't tell anymore. By afternoon, wind picked up and the sky dimmed. Not rain, just a cold snap settling over the woods like a heavy blanket. The cabin didn't have proper insulation. We laid out the thicker blankets and pulled the couch closer to the fire. He looked around. It's freezing in here. You say that every 5 minutes. That's because it is. He nudged the cushions and stretched his arms. We should stay close tonight. Conserve heat. I stared at him. You're suggesting we share the couch? Yeah, like we used to, remember. My mouth opened and shut twice. He wasn't making a move, just watching me. You okay with that? He asked, voice gentler now. I nodded. Too quickly, he brought 2 more blankets, tossed one over us, and sat closer than necessary. Our knees touched under the fabric. His arm brushed mine every time he moved. I tried not to think about it, which meant, of course, I thought. About nothing else? We sat in silence, watching the fire crackle. The light painted gold over his face, softening the lines of his jaw, catching on the stubble along his cheek. I felt every inch between us, and every inch not between us. You. Remember that time we watched that horror movie up here? He asked suddenly, and I pretended I wasn't scared. You screamed louder than me. I did not. You clutched my arm like a child. That was for your comfort, he said, grinning. I'm generous that way. Sure, I said, smiling despite myself. Real noble of you. His grin faded slowly. Something shifted in his expression, like a question he hadn't asked yet was hovering in the space between us. I missed this, he said quietly. Being around you. The words came soft, unguarded. I wasn't ready for them. I missed you too, I replied. It felt more vulnerable than I expected. We sat like that for a while. The fire popped softly. The wind sighed against the cabin walls. And then he moved his arm again, this time, letting it rest behind me along the couch back. Not touching me, not quite, but close. Close enough that I felt the pull of it. The electricity of almost. He didn't look at me, just stared into the fire, face unreadable. And maybe that's why I said, barely above a whisper, what are we doing? He blinked, turning slowly. What do you mean? I hesitated, then tried to smile. Sharing couches like teenagers. Talking about the past like it didn't matter that we stopped talking for years. You looking at? Me like what? Suddenly serious. I looked away. Chest was tight. My hands felt cold, even under the blankets. Like you see me, I said, and I'm not sure what that means. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then quietly, maybe I do. I looked at him again. His eyes didn't flinch. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't teasing. I don't want to screw this up, I said, before I could stop myself. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. You think I do? There was a pause. The fire dimmed, settling into embers. His knee was still touching mine. I always wondered, he said at last. If you knew how I felt back then. My heart skipped. You never said anything. Neither did you. His fingers found the edge of the blanket. He didn't grab my hand, but his knuckles brushed mine. Featherlight touch, deliberate. I didn't know if it was safe, I admitted. Gaze flicking to the fire. Me neither. That silence between us wasn't silence anymore. It was full of breath, of heat, of wanting. He shifted, his thigh pressing more firmly against mine. I kept waiting for you to give me a sign. Did I? Whispered. I thought I did. I missed it. You didn't? I said, barely louder than breath. You ignored it? His jaw tightened. Yeah, he said softly, I did. We sat with that truth between us. Then he turned, body facing me fully now. Can I tell you something stupid? Sure. Used to imagine this exact moment, he said. Not the couch, not the fire, just being this close to you and knowing it wasn't one-sided. My chest ached, and now that it's real, he added, I'm scared to move, scared I'll ruin it. I swallowed hard. What if you don't? He looked at me, the kind of look you only give someone when everything inside you is rising to the surface, but you don't have the words yet. Then slowly he reached out. Tand placed his hand over mine. Not possessive, not rushed, just there. Solid, warm, real. I didn't pull away. His thumb brushed mine, and my breath caught. I didn't pull away. He didn't lean in for a kiss. He didn't need to, because the moment was already too loud, too full of everything we'd never said and finally couldn't ignore. That night, sleep didn't come. Not really. We sat in silence long after the fire had burned down to glowing embers. His hand was still resting over mine, warm, steady, and impossibly gentle. It wasn't a grip. It was an offering neither of us moved. The only sound in the room was the occasional creak of the wood and the distant hush of wind threading through the pines outside. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, in my fingers, in my everything. I wanted to say something, anything. But the words kept backing up, crowding behind my teeth like they were too heavy to let go. He was the one who finally spoke. Do you ever wonder? If we just missed the moment, he said, voice barely above a whisper. It's like maybe we had a chance back then, and we let it slip through. I swallowed, eyes fixed on the orange glow in the hearth. I think about it more than I should. Exhaled a quiet breath, like he'd been holding it for years. Back then, he said, his voice thick with something I couldn't name. I didn't know how to handle the way I felt about you. You were my cousin, yeah, but you were also my favorite person. And when that started to mean something else, something more, I freaked out. Pulled back, I turned to him slowly. He was staring at the fire, his jaw set, eyes low. The way someone looks when they're ashamed of their own truth. You weren't the only one who felt it, I said. My voice cracked a little. I just buried it deeper. His eyes flicked up to mine, startled. Maybe you're just stunned that I'd said it out loud. You mean? He started but couldn't finish. I nodded. Yeah, we sat with that. No more pretending. No more vague suggestions or casual teasing layered with unspoken tension. Just raw honesty finally laid bare. I used to make excuses to be near you, I said, words tumbling out now that the dam had broken. I'd fake being tired just to sit beside you on the couch. I memorized the way your voice dropped when you were sleepy. I felt everything and said nothing. He blinked hard like he didn't trust himself to look at me. I thought I was. Crazy, he said. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I don't know. I'd hear you breathing below me and feel this ache in my chest, and I'd pretend it was something else. Anything else. He finally looked at me. Really looked. His face was open, raw, like a man standing on a ledge with no way back. I'm scared, I said. Not because of you. Because if we cross this line, we can't uncross it. He nodded slowly, eyes searching mine. But what if we've already crossed it? What if we crossed it the first night you came here and didn't pull away when I touched your hand? I let the question hang. What if we did? He shifted on the couch. Closer now, barely inches between us. His thigh pressed against mine again. But this time there was no retreat, no flinch. Just presence. I keep thinking, he said. Softer now. How many versions of my life I've imagined. And the only one that makes sense is the one where I get to fall asleep next to you and not pretend it doesn't matter. I felt something rise in my throat, grief, maybe for all the time lost, hope for what might still be. I didn't come here expecting this, I whispered. I came here because I missed you. I needed to know if what I felt back then was still real. He leaned in close, but not enough to break the space entirely. And is it? Looked at his mouth, then his eyes. It never stopped being. Real. A beat passed, he didn't move. Neither did I. Then finally he reached out and cupped the side of my face with one hand. His thumb brushed just below my eye, soft as breath. "I've wanted to do this since I was 16, he murmured. And then he kissed me. It wasn't some dramatic, sweeping gesture. It wasn't even confident. It was slow, cautious, the kind of kiss that asks permission with every second it lasts. Our lips barely touched at first, just the heat of them, the tremble. I didn't close my eyes right away. I watched his expression change as he leaned in further, as his lips met mine fully. I kissed him back, and in that moment, I swear the room disappeared. The cold didn't matter. The years didn't matter. All that existed was the quiet press of mouths and the feeling of his fingers tightening ever so slightly at my jaw, like he was afraid I'd disappear. When we finally pulled apart, he didn't say anything. Just rested his forehead against mine. "I don't know what happens next," I said quietly. He smiled, the soft, private thing that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Then let's figure it out together." He brushed his nose against mine in the smallest, most affectionate gesture I'd ever felt. It made something deep inside me break open. We didn't speak for a while. We just sat there, legs tangled. Under the blanket, his hand tracing absent circles on the back of mine. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of everything we'd finally allowed ourselves to feel. Eventually, he said, "You should have let me drown in that canoe." I laughed. Too easy. I deserved it. "I still do," I teased, nudging him. And he leaned in again, another kiss, this one lighter. Less afraid. It felt like we'd cracked open something ancient and tender. Like we'd unearthed a secret we had both buried but never forgotten. I didn't want to fall asleep that night, not because I was afraid anymore, but because I didn't want to miss a single second of this version of him, the real one. It's the one who looked at me without walls. And when we lay down together, side by side under the same blanket, he felt his hand find mine under the covers. This time, pretend to be asleep. Morning came slowly, soft light creeping through the wooden slats of the window like it didn't want to disturb us. He was already awake beside me, one arm draped loosely over my waist, his breath warm against the back of my neck. I stayed still, pretending to sleep, not to avoid him, but to savor it a little longer. For the first time in years, I felt held. Eventually, he shifted, and his voice came low and close. "You always sleep this stiff?" I smiled into the pillow. "Only when someone's wrapped around me like a human octopus." He chuckled, pulling his arm back, but not by much. "You could have said something." "I didn't mind," I said, rolling over to face him. "Actually, I didn't want it to stop." His expression softened, still sleepy, still vulnerable from the night before. "Yeah, me neither." We lay there a while, just looking at each other, blinking slowly like neither of us fully believed this was real. Like we were still adjusting to the idea that something had changed, and not just in the air between us, but inside us. "What happens now?" I asked, gently brushing a piece of hair from his forehead. He stretched slightly, hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling. "Honestly, I don't know." "You ever thought about telling anyone else?" "You mean about this?" I nodded. He was quiet for a beat, then looked at me. "I've told myself 1,000 times it didn't matter. That it was just a phase, or bad timing, or something I'd outgrow. And now?" His gaze didn't waver. "Now I don't want to go back to pretending." It hit me then how much he must have carried. All the what-ifs. The years of silence. I'd had them too, but I'd always assumed I was the only one suffering through it. Turns out we were both stuck in the same place, just waiting for the other to say something first. I touched his arm. I'm not expecting a label, or for everything to suddenly make sense. But I don't want this to be a one-time thing. He smiled, wide and honest. "You planning on sneaking into my sleeping bag again?" I snorted. "Please." "You were the one who climbed in like a heat-seeking missile." "Fair," he admitted, laughing. "I guess I was cold. Guess you were lonely?" His face grew. Quiet again, sad, just thoughtful. I've been lonely for a long time. Didn't realize how much until you showed up. That made my chest tighten in a good way, like someone was pressing their palm there and whispering, "You're safe now." We got up eventually, made coffee in the old tin percolator we found buried in a cabinet. He burned the toast. I made fun of him for it. He called me high maintenance because I like my eggs not burned. We bickered playfully while bumping elbows in the tiny kitchen, stealing sips from each other's mugs, and pretending like this was normal. Maybe it was. After breakfast, we took a walk slow, careful because of my ankle, which he teased me about. Constantly. The air was crisp, sky clear, and everything smelled like pine and old earth. The road out was still blocked, but we didn't care. At one point, he reached down and took my hand. Not like he was trying to be romantic. Just like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I let him know one was around. No one needed to know. It was just us, and for the first time, that felt like enough. "You ever think we're making this too easy?" I asked. He looked at me. "You want it to be harder?" "No," I said, chuckling. Isn't it supposed to be more complicated?" "Oh, it will be," he said, grinning. "We live in different cities. We're family. This isn't some fairy tale." But, he echoed, giving my hand a squeeze. "I'd rather figure it out with you than keep wondering what it might have been." I didn't say anything, just nodded. We kept walking like that side by side, fingers laced together, not looking too far ahead. Later that afternoon, we sat on the porch, sipping what he proudly called campfire cocoa, which was just instant. Powder and too much sugar. He rested his head on my shoulder. "You always this soft when you're into someone?" I asked. He smiled against me. "You bring it out? Dangerous talent?" He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. "You're worth the risk." The way he said, "It's so matter-of-fact," so unafraid, made something in me settle. Like all the questions I'd asked myself over the years, finally had an answer. That night we shared the couch again. No hesitation this time. He curled up behind me, one hand resting just under my shirt, thumb brushing slow circles against my skin. Not sexual, just there. We didn't talk much, didn't need to, but before sleep pulled me under. I heard him whisper, barely audible, "This is the first time. I felt like I'm home." And I knew exactly what he meant, because so did I. We stayed at the cabin 2 more days. The road was finally cleared by the county trucks, but neither of us rushed to leave. We pretended we had more firewood to split, more cupboards to organize, more old fishing poles to untangle. But really, we were just holding on. On the morning we were set to leave, he stood by the truck, tossing a duffel in the bed. He looked different in the light, less guarded, less distracted, maybe even a little softer. Or maybe it was me seeing him clearly for the first time, without the filter of doubt. "You sure you don't want to stay a few more days?" he asked. "You? Afraid of missing me already?" Teased, grabbing my own bag. "I'm not afraid of that," he said. "I know I will." That quiet honesty would have caught me off guard once. It just settled in my chest like a steady beat. We did one. Last sweep of the cabin, he checked the windows. I shut the old cabinets. Before locking the door, I stopped and looked around one last time. That place had held so many versions of us. The kids who roughhoused barefoot in the grass. The teens who dared each other into cold lake water. The boys who didn't know how to say, "I think I love you." So they settled for insults and laughter. Now it held something else, as we stood outside. The pine trees swaying softly above us, he turned and said, "I left something inside for you." I raised an eyebrow. "What is this? A scavenger hunt?" "Go see," he said, a half smile playing on his face. "I'll wait." I stepped back into the cabin. The fireplace was cold, the air still. Then I saw it sitting on the windowsill. An old photograph, maybe 13 or 14, caked in mud after a failed rope swing attempt. He had his arms slung over my shoulder, grinning wide. I looked miserable, wet, and flushed, but I was leaning into him. On the back of the photo, written in blue pen, "You were always more than just family to me." It took me too long to say it, but I'm saying it now. I stood there longer than I meant to. Fingers curled around the edge of the frame. When I came back out, he was leaning against the truck, arms folded, pretending not to be watching me. You. Okay, he asked. I held up the photo. You kept this all these years? I almost threw it out once. Didn't want to be reminded of things I thought I couldn't have. I walked over to him, tucking the photo carefully into my backpack. Then I looked up, letting my hand find his. No big gestures. No dramatic declarations. Just that simple touch, quiet, grounded, full of meaning. We're not going back to silence, are we? I asked. He shook his head. No, I don't want to. What do you want? He didn't hesitate. I want to see where this goes. Even if it's slow, even if it's messy, I want you. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't a movie monologue. But it was exactly what I needed to hear. We got in the truck, and for most of the ride down the mountain, we just talked. About small things, about work, about what it might look like to see each other on weekends, maybe even a road trip, maybe not having all the answers. At one point, he reached over and rested his hand on my knee. No words, no glance. Just there. When we stopped for gas in a tiny roadside town, he came back from the store holding 2 coffees and a cheap plastic keychain in the shape of a pine tree. What's this? I asked, taking it from him. He grinned, so you don't forget where it is. All started. I clipped it to my bag without saying a word. But he knew what it meant. Before we hit the highway again, I turned to him. You know this is going to be complicated, right? Yeah, he said. But we've wasted too many years being afraid of complicated. I nodded, and as the road stretched out ahead of us long open, uncertain, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope not, because everything was perfect. But because it wasn't tanned, we still wanted to try anyway. Final line. Voiceover style ending for YouTube. Some stories don't begin when they're supposed to. Some take time, silence, and a little pain to unfold. When the moment finally comes, you just know. You feel it in the quiet, in a look, in the way someone finally reaches for your hand and doesn't let go.